Humphrey.
Hello.
Shannon Reber. And I am Susan Landrigan. We're coming to you from the Innovation Studio at Lakeshore Center for the Arts in Westfield, New York. And today we are going to be talking about publishing.
And publishing is really an interesting subject. We could go way back thousands of years to writing on stones and caves. But we're going to start with this country and how many printing presses were actually here in the 13 original colonies. And by 1763, every single one had a printing press.
Oh.
So writing and producing books was like entertainment for folks. Think about it. They didn't have TVs, they didn't have computers, they didn't have movies, none of that stuff
the internet.
came. Right, even the telephone was later in the 1800s and the early 1900s. So writing and reading books was really a big part of everyone's life. However, most of the books that were being sold by booksellers, bookstores, and they were the impetus behind publishing houses, which was kind of a surprise to me. I just figured publishing houses were a simple thing by themselves, but they weren't. They were an arm of bookstores who wanted to create their inventory. And so these bookstores in the early 1800s, late 1700s, mostly in Philadelphia, Boston, New York, places where they could ship things out, where they had, the Erie Canal.
The larger
and stuff
populations.
Like that. Yeah. And so what they were doing actually is pirating European books, mostly English books. They didn't
So it's not a new thing.
No, they
okay.
They didn't want any copyright laws because they could take a book and reprint it and sell it without paying any royalties to the author. And it seems pretty ruthless, and it really was.
It is
And
shady, yeah.
It wasn't until the late 1800s when American writers were beginning, because there was a certain snobbery. It's always been snobbery in publishing. I hate to tell you, but there's always been those who think they're really good, and those, the rest of us, I guess. But anyway, there was a certain snobbery that American writers just weren't as distinguished and as accomplished and as intellectual.
That's because we beat them.
Yeah. But once, during the Civil War, the dime novels became really popular, and the soldiers were reading them in their pocket novels, And so American writers like Edgar Allan Poe and some of the others became in demand and respected. So that snobbery changed a little bit. And these bookstores and book publishers were realizing that they weren't getting royalties for the books they were publishing because they were being pirated in other countries. So that was when copyright sort of became law in the land, was towards the end of the 1800s. But something else that I think is really interesting, and this is how things kind of go in a cycle, is that in fact, all writers back in the 1800s underwrote their projects. They paid for their books to be printed. And then they were printed either by a bookstore or for a bookstore, and that was what you usually saw, by or for. And so, Edgar Allan Poe is one that we all know, right? Well, his friends got together and they raised the money. It was very expensive.
Those are really good friends. I mean, if it costs thousands of dollars, would you guys actually pitch in to help me
Probably
publish
not.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
What is that app you can get to raise money?
GoFundMe.
GoFundMe, yeah.
And
It was the
children
original.
with cancer can't actually get their money because nobody wants to help.
Well,
Okay, back to publishing.
Back to publishing.
well, the original GoFundMe was friends of writers.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Put together their resources so the writer could print the books, and then it would go into the bookstores. And when you think about it, some of the bookstores, and I just jotted down a few of the names I wanted to because you will recognize Harper Brothers. Was a bookstore, one of the originals, who became a publisher. And in 1853, Harper Brothers had 1,500 books in print.
Really?
So it's really Carey and Holt, Lippincott, Putnam. Those were all bookstores. Original.
Okay.
And-
Interesting.
And they became publishers.
Okay.
And so it was very interesting to me. So here we are, fast forward to 2000, and we went through people submitting, and back in the day, I had to, if I wanted to work with a publishing house, I had to print out 300 pages and ship it off and wait 6 months for someone to hopefully read it in the, quote, the slush pile. And, you spent days and days developing queries and all this other stuff. Well, today, it isn't like that.
It's very different today.
Yeah,
Very
very
different,
true.
very different.
Well, in some ways it is, but those things still exist very much. But not everybody is doing it now.
And there's a reason. And we can thank our big brother, Amazon. Right? We talk about Big Brother. I think people have things happening in their home with some of this Amazon spy stuff. Anyway, that's a different story.
I agree.
Different story.
Different story.
Same story, different story.
A story, yeah. So now we sort of can also underwrite our own books, but it doesn't have to cost a fortune. You don't have to recruit, to a GoFundMe.
Right.
Because if you use something like a print on demand, and there are several of them, but Amazon is the biggest one.
Yes.
And somewhere between 5.5 and 7 million people publish their book every year on Amazon,
That's amazing.
on the platform.
That is so cool.
In fact,
Wow.
Amazon had 5 factories who printed books, and they just recently completed a 6th one right here in the United States.
Ooh.
I don't know how many they have in China or wherever else, but right here in the United States for the demand, to meet the demand of people who want to produce their books.
Right.
But I want to caution folks because I think there's a misconception that if you sit down and you write a book, put all these pages together, somehow magically that turns into wealth. Right?
That's
No.
so cute. That is so cute.
Yeah. I don't want to pop anyone's dream because I would never want to do that. But there has to be more reason to write your book than thinking you're just going to win a Pulitzer Prize or
Right,
be
exactly.
a best-selling author. So what is a best-selling author? A best-selling author is a book that sells, according to the definition today, between 7,000 and 12,000 copies in a week. And it's just a 1-week period. So
Right.
every other week you might sell 5 copies.
Right,
but if
right.
you sell that many copies of a book in a week, you can be on the bestseller list.
That really is
That's
impressive.
interesting.
Yeah.
It used to be a little different. It used to be 40,000 copies over a certain period of time, but that's changed.
Yeah.
Excuse me. About 500,000 to 1 million books are published by publishing houses now.
Right.
The rest of that 7 million is what we call self-published or print-on-demand or independent publishers or vanity presses. Have you had any experience with or knowledge of any of these?
I have not. I've been told stay away from them. They just
Yeah.
take your money.
Yeah, exactly. I have a few authors in the
Yeah.
shop who have done that, and the first guy who told me about it, he said he had to take out a loan and he never made back that money.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
So here's a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
If somebody approaches you and says, I love your book, I want to publish your book, but you're a first-time author, so we're going to share, or we're going to joint venture, or we're going to, somehow you're going to contribute to the cost, and usually in thousands of dollars, with no guarantees and all that kind of stuff. Be very, very leery.
Yeah.
Very leery, because, now the marketplace isn't so much the reader of your books, it's you, the writer of the
Right.
books.
Exactly.
And it doesn't take long to figure that out if you're working with some of these big printing places. But anyway, I wanted to say that there's a couple of things to know I think are interesting. The number 1 selling kind of book genre is...
Romance.
I'm not pointing to you because you guys are romantic and I'm not.
Yeah.
No,
I
no, not
don't like
romance.
to read romance, but
Neither do I. I just sold one yesterday, though. That was the first romance that I've sold in I don't even know how long.
I attended a conference many years ago for Romance Writers of America.
Oh, really?
And I loved it. What a fun group. What a fun group of ladies. And the thing I took away from it, when I've said this before, it's a little embarrassing, but the thing they said is we have to be brazen hussies who shamelessly promote ourselves.
I love that.
I'm
That's
trying.
awesome.
my neckline's not low enough, I guess.
Okay.
Yes. Gonna show a little more cleavage.
So the average, well, let me tell you, in the last year that we had of record keeping for books, only 10 titles sold over 1 million copies.
Really?
Yeah, only 10, and
Oh.
only 500 titles sold over 100,000 copies. And you know what you get for a royalty is
Right,
not
right.
that much.
Yeah.
So
That's-
even if you're one of these elite writers,
Right, exactly.
pretty hard to make a lot of money at it.
It's true.
I'm not saying you can't, but it's not easy.
Difficult because
Yeah.
the market is glutted right now.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Precisely.
Okay, so the first bestseller in the United States was in 1640. Any idea what it might have been? I know you've heard of it.
1640.
60. Yeah. No. Who?
the whole book of Psalms by Jose Glover.
Really?
He had a printing
Oh
press.
my goodness.
And a lot of them, like Ben Franklin had a printing press. And,
Right,
a lot of
yes.
folks had these printing presses, and they were doing things that mostly nonfiction, and dictionaries. Merriam-Webster started
Oh,
doing his
right.
dictionary, and then there were encyclopedias.
Okay.
People were starved for information.
Right.
We're in an information world today.
Right,
Right.
We just
exactly.
can Google, and we get all kinds of information. But
Sometimes it's not right, though. You have to
But
remember
I
that. You have to
remember-
double check Google.
I remember as a little kid sitting down with an encyclopedia and just loving it.
My
just
mom
immersing into
talked
that world.
about that too. Yes.
Yeah, it was like, I don't know how we got them, some salesman probably.
Yeah, yeah.
But we'd get
Yeah.
that encyclopedia, and it was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for the next one. It was like reading a book.
Yeah.
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 We
Yeah.
had a set of encyclopedias at my house,
I had those too. Yeah.
and now they're obsolete.
I know.
Yeah. So I think it would be interesting maybe in a future episode if we talked a little bit about the publishing process for folks today, and
Yeah.
what are some reasons to publish. But today I kind of wanted to just a little bit about the stigma of this idea of being self-published.
It's been around.
It's been around forever.
Forever,
But think
yes.
about it, we're in good company because the
Yeah.
original writers who are now we hold them up as these wonderful, great writers, they were self-published.
Something else. There's nothing new in publishing
No, there
because
really
even serialized novels, the Kindle Vella. Our glorious producer mentioned the last time that we talked about serialized novels, the Sherlock Holmes books were published in a newspaper
Yes.
in little snippets.
Yes.
And I don't remember how long they were, but I mean it's been around forever, and
It has.
we're just continuing on that tradition.
Newspapers, magazines, there were pamphlets that were
Yeah.
produced, especially during the Revolutionary War. There was one of my ancestors, Mercy Otis Warren, would publish poetry that was inciting the revolution.
Really?
Right? Yeah, and so it was published
Oh.
in newspapers. She had to publish under a pseudonym because women,
Of course, of
and she
course.
actually published the first history of the American Revolution in 1805
Oh,
under her name, Mrs. Warren. I
Very
have it. It's a
interesting.
2-set volume. I'll talk more about that some
that's
other
cool.
time.
How cool
Yeah.
to have that.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
amazing.
So I don't want to discourage you because there are a few
Yes.
stories of really successful self-published
Exactly.
authors. I'm thinking of The Celestine Prophecy was one that I read, everybody read. It has a lot of, we would say not the best writing,
Okay.
but a great story. And he
Cool.
sold, I forget how many millions. The Martian,
Oh,
which
yeah.
was made into a movie,
Yes,
that
yes.
was a self-published. I didn't know 50 Shades of Grey originally was self-published. Still Alive by Lisa Grants was self-published, and It Ends With Us by Colleen Hobbs sold 8.6 million copies.
Really?
So it
That
is,
is so
it is
impressive.
possible.
Yes,
But you
yes.
gotta realize the odds
They
are pretty...
probably were brazen hussies when they were promoting it.
Well, all of those actually could be, or most of them, I think could be.
Well, it's time to wind down.
Okay.
How about the word of the day?
I think we
Surprise me. I want to hear a good word.
The word for the day today is Megillah.
Ooh.
It's a long, involved story or account. Also, one of the 5 books of the Hebrew Scriptures.
Oh, interesting.
Well, that's really interesting because I only have one thing I associate that with, and it's gorilla.
Megillah Gorilla.
But now I
I
know.
can think of the last name McGillicuddy, so that's what I think every
Oh.
time I hear Megillah.
Well, I want to use the word. Say it again. It's a...
Megillah. Megillah. It's a long, involved story or account.
Okay.
So perhaps in police work, they might say, give me just the facts. I don't want the whole Megillah.
Oh my gosh!
I like it.
Oh my gosh! I have to figure out how to use that. I love that. Thank
It's a
you,
good
Susan.
one.
Thank you for spending time with us today. We value your feedback. Please let us know how we're doing and if there's anything you would like us to talk about in the future.
And
We'll see you next week. Thank you very much. Please share and like.
happy writing.